Akkad. Our story starts around 2334 BCE in a place called Mesopotamia. This means land between two rivers. A man named Sargon lived here. He did something nobody had ever done before. He took over many cities and put them all under his control. This was the Akkadian Empire. It was the world's very first empire. Sargon wasn't born rich or royal. The old stories say someone found him as a baby floating in a basket on a river. A gardener took him in and raised him. But Sargon grew up and became powerful. He worked for a king, then he took over and became king himself. Sargon built an army and conquered cities one by one. His empire stretched from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The Akkadian Empire only lasted about 180 years, but it showed everyone else how to run an empire. They had one government for everyone, they had a trained army, they made everyone use the same money, and they even had one language.
Ancient Egypt. Egypt lasted over 3,000 years. That's longer than almost any civilization ever. The Old Kingdom built the pyramids. The Middle Kingdom did lots of trading, but the New Kingdom, starting around 1550 BCE, made Egypt into a real empire. Egyptian pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II were warrior kings. They conquered lands to the south in Nubia and to the north in Syria. Egypt controlled all the important trade routes. This made them incredibly rich. But Egypt wasn't just strong because of their army. They were strong because of their culture. Egyptian art and buildings and religion influenced everyone around them for thousands of years. Their writing system, called hieroglyphics, covered their temples and tombs. The Egyptians mummified their dead pharaohs and put them in giant tombs filled with treasure. They believed in many gods and built huge temples to worship them. When Rome finally conquered Egypt in 30 BCE, they didn't destroy Egyptian culture, they copied it and kept it alive.
Assyria. If Egypt was the eternal kingdom, Assyria was the war machine. Starting around 911 BCE, the Assyrians became the most feared fighters the ancient world had ever seen. Their armies were the first to really use iron weapons, soldiers on horses, and big machines to break down city walls. The Assyrians were experts at making people afraid. They spread scary stories about what they did to enemies. Cities that fought back got destroyed completely. Cities that gave up had to pay taxes and let Assyrian governors rule them. At its strongest point under King Ashurbanipal in the 7th century BCE, Assyria controlled land from Egypt to the Persian Gulf. They ruled from the Mediterranean Sea to the mountains of Iran. But here's the thing about empires built on fear. They don't last long. When people hate you, they rebel. Internal fights broke out, other empires attacked. In 609 BCE, Assyria fell apart completely.
Persia, after Assyria fell, something amazing rose up. The Persian Empire, started by Cyrus the Great in 550 BCE. At its biggest, Persia controlled about 44% of all the people on Earth. That's almost half of everyone alive. What made Persia different was how they treated people they conquered. Cyrus was known for being nice to different religions. He let people keep their own customs and worship their own gods. He even freed Jewish people who were trapped in Babylon and let them go home. Cyrus created the first Declaration of Human Rights. He wrote it on a clay cylinder. It said people should be free to choose their religion. The Persians built something called the Royal Road. It was 1,600 miles long, with rest stations along the way. Messages could travel from one end to another in just 7 days. That was super fast for ancient times. They created coins that everyone used. They set up a mail system. They had smart government workers who managed the most diverse empire the world had known. Persian power reached its peak under King Darius the Great. He made the empire even bigger, adding parts of India and Central Asia. He even tried to conquer Greece. That didn't go so well. Greece. Greece was never really one big empire. It was many city-states, but Greece changed the world more than most empires. Cities like Athens and Sparta created democracy, philosophy, theater, and science. When Persia invaded Greece, the Greeks were way outnumbered, but they won impossible victories at battles like Marathon and Salamis. Then came Alexander the Great. In just 13 years, from 336 to 323 BCE, this young king from Macedonia conquered the entire Persian Empire. He even reached India. Alexander died at only 32 years old.
His empire immediately broke into pieces, but his cultural influence lasted for centuries.
Ancient China. While Alexander was conquering to the west, China was unifying to the east. The Qin dynasty only lasted 15 years, from 221 to 206 BCE, but it changed everything. Emperor Qin Shi Huang took hundreds of small fighting states and made them into one empire. He made everyone use the same writing system, the same money. He even made cartwheels the same width so they'd fit in the same ruts on roads. Emperor Qin also started building the Great Wall of China. Thousands of workers spent years building it. When he died, he was buried with an army of 8,000 clay soldiers. This terracotta army was meant to protect him in the afterlife. The Han dynasty came next and lasted much longer. They created the Silk Road, a huge trade route connecting China to the Mediterranean Sea. Chinese silk, porcelain, and inventions like paper and gunpowder traveled this road and eventually changed the whole world.
Rome. And then came Rome. Starting as a tiny city in 753 BCE, Rome would build an empire lasting over 1,000 years in the west. In the east, it lasted almost 2,000 years. Rome conquered the Mediterranean through smart military tactics. Julius Caesar was a general who conquered Gaul, which is known as France these days. When he crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BCE, he broke Roman law. This started a civil war that transformed Rome from a republic into an empire. His adopted son, Augustus, became the first emperor. He brought in the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. This was 200 years of relative peace and prosperity. At its peak, under Emperor Trajan in 117 CE, Rome controlled every coast around the Mediterranean Sea. They ruled Britain, most of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Rome built roads that still exist today. They made buildings that still stand after 2,000 years. The Roman language, Latin, turned into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Roman laws are still the basis for modern law.
The Americas. Rome's power ended at the Atlantic Ocean, but across that ocean, great civilizations were rising and falling that Europe wouldn't discover for another 1,000 years. The Maya created sophisticated writing, math, and studied the stars. In South America, the Inca built the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. It stretched 2,500 miles along the Andes Mountains. They didn't have wheels, horses, or iron tools, yet they built roads, bridges, and stone cities high in the mountains that amaze modern engineers. Machu Picchu, built around 1450 CE, shows Incan stonework so perfect that you can't fit a knife blade between the blocks. Every empire we've talked about today followed the same pattern. They rose up through military strength, new ideas, or cultural power. They reached amazing heights of wealth and influence. They seemed unbeatable. And then they fell through problems inside, attacks from outside, or both. The Akkadians lasted 180 years. The Assyrians lasted 300 years. The Persians fell to Alexander. Alexander's empire broke apart right after he died. Rome lasted longer than most, but eventually crumbled. The Inca fell to Spanish conquistadors in one generation. These were the ancient empires that built our world. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible ancient empires, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're exploring more amazing history that shaped our world. From forgotten civilizations to legendary warriors, there's so much more to discover together. Drop a comment below and tell us which ancient empire fascinated you the most. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.